are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution.
It's September the 22nd of 2016, and tonight's featured RNN show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Welcome to the Republic News Network, our live national broadcast. You may call me Kelby, and tonight I'm going to be acting as your moderator. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing this radio broadcast for about 6 years, and it's always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. It is true. The United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction lies within the District of Columbia. You can find this under Title 28, Section 3002, and also Uniform Commercial Code 9-307H. The Republic government is just a bunch of U.S. citizens that realized they wanted to be Americans, as our founders intended. We have been hard at work now for 8 years and have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know it's hard to understand. Don't worry, we are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government. You can consider the Republic members are simply tired of all the corruption that we see every day. See, we found in the law that there is, in fact, two forms of government here on our land, and we did something about it. We are people. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, we have families just like you. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world. So get ready to hear things that sound amazing, and get ready to understand that you are about to be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel and the Republic for the United States of America. Before we go into our broadcast, please bow your head in prayer. Father God, as we go through some very interesting times, please, Lord, bless us, bless this call, bless the people on it, and keep us safe. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Mr. Happel, I yield the floor to you, sir.
Thank you, Kelby. Tonight on the Connecting the Dots radio show, I actually have two guests who we actually moved this agenda forward so that we could have these guests on tonight. And one of our previously scheduled guests we moved so that we could do this. This is a really interesting program, and it's going to be a continuation of a program we did about 6 weeks ago, and that program was about the separation in the law, and we called it Laws Are for the Little People, and this is part 2 of that program, and this is How to Handcuff a National Security Investigation. I took that title directly from the Forbes article that was written by Chuck Floyd and Bruce Morgan, and that was done for Forbes magazine. And these gentlemen contacted me about a week and a half ago, and we've had quite a bit of dialogue, and I've gone through this article, and it's incredible. And I just have to tell you, this is an expose extraordinaire. We had a great one 6 weeks ago, where we had Jeff Wright and Bill Coate talk about the breaches in security, but this goes even beyond that, and it goes beyond that in a way that's really unique, because both of these gentlemen not only have been involved in the national security field, but they're still actively involved, in their major contractors and major consultants with Congress and a number of federal agencies on the issues of national security, and do investigations in that regard. So I would like to start tonight's program by suggesting that our listeners go to this week's program outline. We call it our billboard. It's what we send out all over the country on email and YouTube and all the social media sites. But go to that site, and on that site there is an archived copy of Chuck and Bruce's Forbes magazine article. It's called How to Handcuff a National Security Investigation. please download that onto your computer if you happen to be where you can do that, so that you can follow along, because what we are going to do tonight is discuss that 6-page article. We're going to use it as an agenda basically for the discussion that we have tonight. And with that said, I'd like to introduce our guests, Chuck Floyd and Bruce Moran, and I would like to have both of you gentlemen kind of briefly describe your background so that our listeners can understand what a special treat it is to have gentlemen of your credentials on our show to talk about national security. So I guess, Chuck, we'll start with you, and then would like to have Bruce talk as well.
Okay, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about how the national security investigation of Hillary Clinton has been handcuffed by the FBI, by the White House, and others. I am a retired U.S. Army field grade officer, and I have been a presidential appointee under Bush. I managed $50 billion worth of construction and renovations of all of our embassies worldwide under Colin Powell. I've been a U.S. contractor probably for about 10, 12 years now. We do cybersecurity, we do IT services, all kinds of different things for the federal government. Cyber is huge. We're very tied in to a company that monitors hackers and others worldwide and knows every hacker in the world. So we have access. I have a TS, top security clearance. We have access to a lot of documents, a lot of things, and so we know exactly what's going on throughout the federal government.
Great, thank you. And Bruce, could you give a little of your background now? Thank you.
Yes, I work with Chuck at Security Solutions Technology. I'm the Senior National Security Advisor. I work on the Hill with various projects, crisis readiness, crisis preparedness, presenting reports, different kinds of agendas. Like Chuck was saying, we work with various high-end cybersecurity work groups. That's one of my specialty areas. And the reason why we had written this article is because we felt it was necessary to give people a understanding of the breadth and depth of what had happened, and there wasn't really a full-fledged investigation going on to address all the national security risk and exposures that were there. So okay. I'm ready to go. So whatever you're ready to.
I guess let's start the conversation with the most obvious question that we could possibly have, and that is, how could anyone justify the ascension of Hillary Clinton to the office of the president with her open contempt for basic national security protocols and for the rule of law? And I'll leave that open and let you guys just kind of step in.
Okay, this is Chuck. Bruce, I'll go first and you can go. That way you can fill in everything I don't say, which is a lot. I have a top secret clearance, and so I've had it for the last probably 30 years. Every year we have to have training classes, and the government provides to you all these training modules that you have to do online. You read them, you go through them, then you have to take a test. You have to pass a test in order to maintain your security clearance. Clinton had to do the same thing. So as First Lady of Arkansas, from First Lady of the White House, a senator, the Secretary of State, she had to go through all these different tests. She knew exactly what the security requirements are. She knows the system, and she intentionally circumvented the government system so that she could do the things that she was doing, laundering money for the Clinton Foundation and other things. So, again, if you follow the dots, I like your opening statement by following the dots. If you follow the dots of the State Department, the CIO, the Undersecretary of Management, there had probably be at least 100 people from NSA to the White House to all these other federal agencies that knew that she was not using a government email, because every time you have a government email, the end is .gov. So when I was at State Department, mine was cfloyd@state.gov. And so everybody knows whether it's a .gov, .com, .org, and so it's easily distinguishable. And so everybody knew what she was doing. She tried to cover it up. And if it hadn't been for Judicial Watch, Citizens United, and other groups following FOIA requests, which the White House and the State Department just delayed and delayed and delayed forever. It took them 2 years to get a FOIA request into the State Department to get the information, and then only through federal courts saying you must deliver did they get this information. And so, again, you have to look at who knew, you look at the intent, and the procedures for being and having a security clearance. She knew what she was doing. She violated everything that the government has set up.
Okay, Bruce, would you like to respond?
I concur, and I'd like to add on, there are certain protocols, which you had mentioned earlier, Dan, that you have to follow. Subsequent to her being in office, or while she was in office, there are executive orders written by President Obama that you had to follow. So that required her not only to be the Secretary of State, but she had the supervisory capacity to make sure that her subordinates were following according to all the national security standards that were in place. So what we have is, what I like to talk about now is the ability to handle classified information. And you got those 4 levels: confidential, secret, top secret, and special access programs. And what Chuck was saying, which is right on, is that you do have top secret clearances, but you also have people who have special access program clearances too, which her aides didn't have, and she probably was the only one that had it because she was a cabinet member. So we have a series of risk and exposures going on to people who are out in the field. Now, these could be people who are working for the CIA as covert operators, or what we call special operations group peoples, what you commonly call Navy SEALs or Marine Expeditionary Forces, or somebody coming out of Fort Bragg on a special mission that they fly at night. They do halo jumping. These are the kind of people that could be exposed. And if they're living overseas, say in Signalia, you've probably heard of that when you heard of Benghazi, they could have flew crew out of Signalia, or Stuttgart. Here we have people possibly living there with their families. If that information is exposed on one of their missions, one of their children, a son or a daughter who may be going to school or out to lunch or on the weekend, to visit a theme park, can be kidnapped and ransomed or killed. So that's the kind of exposure we're talking about. And Chuck is, saying, okay, we have the in-house, then we have the outside server. The outside server is operating outside the national security realm, and that's where we come in and we're saying, wow, this is really bad. I mean, we never heard of anything like this before. What's going on here? That's what goes on to our mind. It's very mind-boggling. So if you're taking it from a perspective of a professional who understands cybersecurity, who's making sure everybody is online and there isn't any sabotage, there isn't infiltration, there isn't any other kind of manipulation going on with the system itself or the devices. So devices we call handheld computers, or where you can have tablets now and different things. Those kind of systems are all vulnerable to espionage, people coming in, agents, foreign governments, even foreign corporations want access to information at the State Department.
Sure.
You have operations running out of embassies. You have all kinds of information traveling back and forth between the embassies and the State Department that are secure and high-level security, where people are traveling. If the enemy gets a idea of where somebody's traveling, they can intercept them on the ground, kidnap them, and hold them for ransom, or kill them, depending, or torture them and get the information they want. So these are the kind of things we're thinking about in a larger sense of what's going on, who's doing what, when's it going to happen, and those questions needed to be asked at some point in a full-fledged investigation. That's what we talked about right in the first two sentences there. You know.
Yeah.
Sure.
When the FBI, this is Chuck, when the FBI did the investigation, they really didn't have a strategy, a good protocol. They didn't even talk with her under oath. Comey didn't even want to be there during the investigation because he knew what was going to happen. You look at Loretta Lynch, Attorney General, meeting with Bill Clinton in an airplane on a runway in the Midwest. I mean, just follow the dots and try to figure out who did what, why did they do it. Again, if I, or you look at Petraeus and many others, if we had given information, classified information to our subordinates that did not have clearance or had some types of clearance but didn't have all the clearances, if we gave that information to them and they put it in an email and sent it around, we would be in jail in Fort Leavenworth.
Sure.
I mean,
sure you would.
Her age, she passed on things to them, and then they took out all of the classifications, put it in her private email server, and sent it out. And so her aides are in dire trouble if the investigation ever matures, because they could go to jail just like she could.
Well, you know, that's it's interesting to me that we had so little, as you said, there was so little thought that went into the investigation according to the way the FBI approached it. And I think in your article you mentioned that really justice is one that should have taken the lead in that, and then required the FBI to do the investigation, and then justice really come up with the protocols or the ways they want to handle the overall investigation, and instead it went the other way around. I guess I'm going to ask you guys this, and it may put some people on the hot seat, but can you specify who her enablers were at state, justice, and the FBI? Who were the people that allowed this to happen? And I don't know that you have to state specific names, but let's at least try to get as close to, a solid framework, a hierarchy of how this whole thing came about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go first.
Let's go back to Benghazi, because you had the Pickering-Mullen report. I don't know if you recall that. And it was an in-house investigation by the State Department. And what you saw there was the scope of the investigation. It didn't investigate the Secretary of State, who was Hillary Clinton, but investigated what was happening on the ground in Benghazi. At such time, you saw non-disclosure agreements, which is probably going to be the later part of our discussion, given to 40 people. So they had the ability to, when Congress went into their, I think it was 7 or 8 different hearings on this, certain of these people couldn't testify. So what you're saying, and here's what we're talking about. The FBI was also issued to their agents non-disclosure agreements going into the investigation. So what does that mean? Well, that's a question we both have. Did Loretta Lynch do that? And what kind of investigation were they doing? So we're looking at the limited scope in the investigation, which, we saw the information coming forth, and James Comey making a directive on it. And then what we don't know is what happened up at the other levels. You get other levels of government. And what you're looking at, I think what you're saying to me is who else can help with the investigation, make it go forward. That
right.
could happen at the Clapper level, James Clapper. He's head of DNI. So there's something. I don't know what collaboration was done between Justice, which would be Loretta Lynch, and Jim Clapper, how far of the investigation they wanted to do, and what the investigation entailed. Now, I don't want to put anybody on the spot like you're saying, but you have to ask those questions in order to get the kind of answers you're, inferring here. And the whole idea about the investigation itself, as you saw at the end here, there was a House Oversight Committee with Chavez. He's the chairman of it. The FBI had put both classified and non-classified information in the SCIF. A SCIF is an area where you go to look at information. And here's the other part of what Chuck and I were talking about. I'm getting tangential, but this is important to understand. A SCIF is an area where you go into where there might be somebody standing over your shoulder. You can't take any electronic devices in. And then you're reading top secret information and special access program information, other information of that nature. How does information get out of the SCIF and into her server? And what agency did that? Who was the source agency? So if you have a CIA document in there or a Department of Defense document in there, you have all these requirements that you have to look at it in a SCIF. It's a secured area. How did it get out of a SCIF? Then how did it get over to the server? And who gave it to them and who didn't follow it through? That's the audit we were talking about in the article. That's a question that needs to be asked. So the investigation itself and how the agencies are working, that's an interdepartmental kind of thing you want to look at, and how the investigation went forward or didn't go forward. And then who does it? Well, then you're asking possibly Justice, possibly James Clapper, or who in the FBI was thinking or not thinking about that. We don't know. And you got to be totally honest about this and kind of rip your mind apart saying it's mind-boggling, because these are the kind of things you really want to know, and because there's heavy-duty exposure here and heavy-duty risk. And you got to know who has the time-sensitive information, what was stamped on it, who was giving it, who was handling it. Did they have a right to handle it? Did they have a right to review it? Did they have a right to share it? Did they have a right to store it? Did they have a right to delete it? See what I'm talking about now? You have all these different areas when you go into handling classified information at the top secret and special access program level. It's not supposed to leave the SCIF. They transmitted it evidently through a telecommunications, a telephone, going to a private server.
Hey, Bruce, let me get in here real quick to answer this question. Who at the State Department knew what she was doing? Well, the CIO, the Undersecretary for Management, and many others knew exactly what she was doing, because they had to set everything up for her, and they knew that she didn't have a .gov email account. And so, I mean, there were probably, 30, 40, 50 people at the State Department that knew what was going on, that she was circumventing the State Department information. And if you look at what kind of information she receives as a Secretary of State, especially versus Secretary of Housing or those kind of other jobs, the Secretary of State probably gets 90% of the information that he or she would read as classified. It's very few things that are not classified when you're Secretary of State, because you have thousands of cables and other emails and other things coming in every day from all the embassies around the world. And the State Department has endpoint-to-endpoint security, from communication links to computers, etc. And they know what they're doing, and she circumvented everything.
Well, the thing that worries me is how in the world can they justify having such an incredible double standard? Because when I was in the service 45 years ago in Washington, D.C., I had a top secret security clearance then, and it was a big deal. And it was only because I worked on, I was stationed at Fort McNair, and I worked on war colleges and a lot of the, buildings in downtown D.C. that were somewhat secret, but good grief, the Secretary of State, how she could possibly justify this. And what concerns me is that there's such an incredible double standard, in applying the law to everybody that happened to be the little people, but not Hillary. How in the world did they allow this to happen?
Well, it's all political and run by the White House and DOJ. Even when Clinton was at the State Department, she sent out directives directing everybody to use State Department emails and not to use any personal email for government business, and they prosecuted several people on that very effort. And so she has always thought that she's above the law, she can do anything she wants, and because she was doing this, she thought she would not get caught. And if she did, she figured that Obama and the Democrats would protect her, and they've done a very good job at it.
Well, you know, she's the prototypical example of what a sociopath is, and certainly with the fact that she seems to have gotten away with it, it's incredible to me that she's got as many enablers as she has. You guys put at the end of your article that you did for Forbes magazine, you had a list of things that you feel that Hillary Clinton needs to explain to the people. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about that before the end of the program. So as we get close to the end of the program, if we haven't gotten through some of this other stuff, I definitely want to get on to that, because you're absolutely right. That's a thing that needs to be explained to the American people, and if she can't do that, she is not qualified to be President of the United States. Would you gentlemen explain what Obama's executive orders 13526 and 13587 were, and why it's so important that Hillary Clinton should have followed those protocols?
Bruce, you want to take that?
All right. It's basically, if you look at 13526, it's you have to be in compliance, or you have to follow national security protocols. That's basically what it does. It sets them all out. Subsequent to that time, they got a little more stringent, so they executed 13587, and that they at that time they brought together an insider threat task force. And then, if you're asking what she had to do in terms of a relationship to her job, well, she had to be in compliance with the insider threat task force, which was the authorization and approval of her server and devices to go through the insider threat task force. From my understanding with this, I think they have to do it annually. So there's an audit. That is definitely part of the protocol, because you're handling classified information. Part of that is also definitely you have to report annually with 13587, Executive Order, to the Senior Information Sharing and Safeguarding Steering Committee. So if you're looking at how all this is transpiring at the time, and she had a outside server, what was she doing with the steering committee and the safeguards that she was doing if she had to report annually to it, through the executive order? So that's a question we have. If you have something, you're operating outside the system, and you have these protocols you have to follow. Did she follow the protocols at all? Who did it, and how did they do it? Okay. Now, as you realized, when she was talking about, she didn't know if the documents were marked or not marked, classified, top secret. Well, if there's any types of variations, which they call deviations, in this information, you have to report it to the Director of Information Oversight. That stuff like that was going on in her server. So you have these levels of checks and cross-checks and counter-checks of what's going on and how information is being shared, being viewed, stored, secured, and then, deleted. And the agency's giving it to you. But according to these executive orders, then if you don't follow them, you get sanctions. And then the sanctions move you into what? Well, we're talking about investigations and looking at the criminality side. So usually with executive order, those are like rules of the road. And you have to follow these rules of the road. You know, if you go speeding and you're out there drinking and you hit something, well, you're responsible. So, and this kind of thing dovetails into what you were talking about. What are these executive orders? They're basically rules of the road to follow for national security.
Okay. This is Chuck. A couple of comments here. You know, Bruce is right on target. It's just it's like ISO or CMMI procedures that for businesses. You know, you write your procedures and you got to follow your procedures. You know, remember when Hillary Clinton did the reset button with the Russians? They were hacking her email server. They knew everything about her. They were just laughing all the way to the bank, saying what an idiot she is. She thinks she's telling us something new, and we already know it. And if you go back when President Bush was in office, you look at Scooter Libby and what he was charged with, and they knew that Richard Armitage had said something at a social event about a certain agent, that sort of stuff. And look at the media and everybody who wanted to crucify Karl Rove from everybody else, and finally got Scooter Libby. But the media will not go after Clinton because they're trying to protect her. If it was anybody else, they would be after him night and day.
So does that answer your question on executive orders, or do you need a little bit more?
Yes, I think it does. And one of the things that I kind of wanted an idea of, what that was. And the reason I asked that is because, and this is something, Bruce, you were intimately involved with Chuck in, and that's cybersecurity. Anymore, just counting keystrokes and little subtle things about the way people use a private server are things that can determine an awful lot about the psychological profile of a person. And, these things are getting very, very sophisticated.
It's beyond what most people think, Dan.
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, they can figure out so much stuff. And here we've got an unsecured server out in a barn somewhere in upstate New York that she is using for not only classified information, but private information, and it's all being commingled, none of it encoded. I know there's an encoding process at the State Department that is pretty extensive to make sure that none of this stuff is accessible. How in the world did they get around all that?
Well, what her aides did is they took the classified information, copied it, and then put just the information they wanted to send to her in her private emails, and so that's what they did. I mean, they broke the law. They didn't follow procedure, and so she knew it. Her aides knew it. Everybody around her knew it, and she was putting everybody at danger. And so again, she's above the law. And what was her? We always go back to what was her intent. Was her intent was not to be FOIA'd? Was her intent that Republicans and others couldn't see what she was doing? Was her intent to launder money into the Clinton Foundation? So there was a lot of questions there that FBI did not ask, and I think the agent was told, don't ask certain things, just do what you can do, and we'll let you out of here.
Can I add something, please?
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the legal side of it, the intent, and that's, you could monkey around with that word, but I prefer to look at her actions. What was she doing? How did she act? And now we're talking about what was exposed, what was at risk, how protocols weren't followed. That's how she acted. Her intentions could have been, who knows, But the way she acted is the way we drew up this article. The only way we could, and we wrote that in the article, we wouldn't want to write this article unless we thought something serious went down, and we don't know what went down to what extent. So her actions made us do what we did in order to be responsible citizens, and then, because we have our national security backgrounds, talk about it at length and how we thought what should be covered, not only in the investigation, but what the people in the United States should know, how things happen at the national security level, and how it impacts so many different things. It's about the impact of the action. That's what we talk about, the impact of the action. It's not the intent. You know, we don't want to get screwed up in the legal part of it. We want to say what action was taken, and then what is the impact, and how does the impact affect, you know, these investigations that happened. And
that's a reasonable way to look at it, because the impact is what's going to affect the United States of America. And if somebody doesn't have a good enough judgment to recognize that as the head of the State Department, they certainly shouldn't be President of the United States. And incidentally, I have to tell you, I have sent this billboard and descriptor for tonight's program out to several of the top aides at the Trump campaign, and I'm hopeful that at least one of them are on the call tonight, because they need to understand that this is something that I think has not been properly investigated, and in my mind, we need to really get down in the weeds on this stuff and find out just exactly what Hillary Rodham Clinton has on her mind, that she would think this is just something that's a normal activity and she ought to be able to get away with it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. You know, if you look at what Rudy Giuliani has said, as you know, premier prosecutor himself, he's gone through all the items that she did, from setting up her own server to having her aides, you know, destroy some of her devices with a hammer and all these sort of things. And so he's gone through the entire list and goes, hey, look at physically, just like Bruce said, what has she done? You know, they use the company out in Colorado, look at how they went through and tried to wipe all of the emails and the records with the software program that they used. I mean, you look at what she's physically done, and you go, wow, you know, she's very knowledgeable about all the things in order to divert attention from herself and destroy evidence and everything, so nobody knows.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember what they did to Richard Nixon, Tricky Dick, when he wiped out 18 minutes of tape, and it looks to me like we've got a pretty significant double standard when she can wipe out, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of emails and classified documents being reclassified and everything else, and get away with it. It's just absolutely mind-boggling to me. Now, you were talking about this bleach bit. That could you kind of tell everybody and the listeners about that organization in Colorado that did the cleanup on her server? And actually, didn't they kind of bragged about the way they had cleaned up and scrubbed a lot of the stuff off her server?
Plus, they gave Pagliano a pass on it, so they weren't going to investigate him. They gave him immunity. So that, in and of itself, is real hard to digest. You know, in understanding that if somebody actually destroyed the information, and then you're given immunity.
Yeah, the company out in Colorado was hired by the Clinton Foundation initially, and then she used this company to set up her server. And again, the CEO of the company said, if I had known that she was going to put classified material on the server, I would have never set it up for her. Yet when, you know, just like Bruce said, this individual that set it up, when he was subpoenaed by Congress, he didn't even show up. Nothing's happened to him. You look at the company reps that did the software cleaning and set up, you know, where they hosted the server, they pleaded the fifth in front of Congress. And so nobody wants to talk, yet Congress has not done their job. They should have been on this from day one. They should have known this 5 years ago what she was doing, and he took judicial watch with FOIAs to get the information to give to Congress so that they would know. This administration, from the IRS to the State Department, all the other agencies, block everything going to Congress and refuse to give it to them, which is just atrocious to me. And Congress has not had the guts to do anything with Obama and his administration.
Well, as a matter of fact, I think our entire Congress has shown an incredible lack of will, and I think most of them have forgotten that their primary obligation is to the American people and not to the federal government. And I think, that's a reason an awful lot of people in this country no longer have any respect for the government, and they actually fear our own government. And that's a tragedy, because that's not the way we were raised to believe. Guys, could you kind of explain to the listeners how secured information is encoded and encrypted, and how that process works, and then maybe give a description of how you think she circumvented that?
Well, in our article we talk about NSA Suite B, so that's encryption. So that's just a normal encryption. You go 128 bits, 256 bits, and then you have a FIPS2 on it, so you got keys on it. What that really means is the encryption code you can't break. Let's take a step back, because she tried to draw Colin Powell into it, as you recall. Well, Colin Powell left office in January. The NSA Suite B was approved by the government a month after he got office. That was in effect for 4 years. The NSA Suite B, the encryption that she could have put on her server and devices. So what we're saying is, Colin Powell got out of office in 2005, and she was in office in 2009. NSA Suite B encryption for protecting your server was in effect. And she had all the capability to talk to anybody in the intelligence community, any special matter expert, advice from her own State Department and how to set up the private servers to make it secured. So the NSA Suite B is an encryption coding device that is approved to make sure your messages are secure.
Right.
I can go into greater detail. I mean, they have a high bandwidth, a low bandwidth, different things for different security levels. Right now, we're in FIPS2 instead of FIPS1. And there, I put FIPS1 on the report because that's the one she would have been using at the time. Right now, we're in the FIPS2, which is more sophisticated and covers a higher level of security. And as you get into encryption and companies developing security methodology, say the banks need it for protecting your accounts, but also the exchanges need it, the security exchanges for trading stocks and bonds. We don't want anybody coming into them, so they got their own encryption. But this particular encryption is for a high level, secret, top secret. So that's what FIPS2 is about. So at the time she was in office, she would have been into the area where FIPS1 could have been accessed, and she could have put it on her private server. So in other words, she could have
actually avoided it, didn't she? She just did everything in her ability to make sure that she didn't have that kind of security.
Well, she has to answer these questions. I mean, this is what was available, and this is right when she was, just starting out as Secretary of State in 2009. I mean, that's and what does that do? I mean, what does encryption do? Because we're getting towards the end of our time, and you said you wanted to talk about that. Well, prevents sabotage, espionage, infiltration, exfiltration, all the different things that can happen, and the exposures and the risk. That's what it prevents. So, if information was being transmitted from the State Department from her aides to her server or to her phone, all those are exploitable. What we mean by exploitable is that a hacker can come in, or a foreign government or espionage group can come in and get the information. From the phone itself, they can even come in through your HVAC system, okay? They can come in through your printer. And so there's many ways that, they come in through the tower. We call it spoofing. The tower is when, say, Cheryl Mills is sending Hillary a message. It could be, say, classified, and it can be intercepted in the tower by a microwave or by somebody putting a device up there. So there's probably, if you read in the article, we put mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling in different ways the information could have been extrapolated and used for espionage purposes or for the hackers. Oh, it's a ransom, or kidnap people. All the way, this goes all the way to the Clinton Foundation, because we don't know, they could have came in through the Clinton Foundation, into the server, and into her, own phone. And then we had this discussion the last time we were on the air, and we talked about a sandbox. And this is what you were talking about, Dan. You can create a sandbox, and it mimics everything you do. So you get to play in your sandbox. So if Hillary's thinking she's sending out an email, and it's a classified, say, secret, top secret, and she doesn't get it out, they created a sandbox for her to play in there to figure out what she was doing so they can get the code she's working at, and they can transit from her being in the sandbox out and go into the State Department. In other words, they're using espionage tactics. Aside from using microwaves and coming directly in, that's how the Hill is protected, and that's how the State Department of Foggy Bottom is protected. That's Chuck is talking about satellite communications, encryption. But to come in, there's so many vulnerability points to come in, and if these people aren't securing their phones, they're definitely going to have problems with that. Just the phones themselves, the computers themselves, their laptops themselves, their own coming back into the State Department. So those are multiple ways. That's why we say it's mind-boggling to figure we can get classified information stolen, and then lives are on the line from there. Chuck, you want to add something to that, or?
No, that's good for now. We can go on, and if you have other questions, then we can talk about the recommendations on the list.
Well, I would like to. I would definitely like to discuss the list that you had, the 7 items that you had on your list that need to be answered by presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. I hope that, again, that some of the Trump people are on this call so that they can go to the article and pull up the information, the questions that you had there. But Chuck, would you like to kind of go over what you think she needs to explain to the American people before she could possibly be qualified to be the President of the United States?
Absolutely. I'll start with the first one, and then I'll let Bruce come in. Again, the first question is, did your private server and personal devices meet NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards, Suite B and FedFIPS, 140 certification, or not? And so we know that she did not have any malware, ransomware, anything else on her server. And so the first question, did you protect your server? The answer is no. And so, again, the individual that she had set it up, the FBI gave him immunity. He didn't even show up in front of Congress. What are they doing? You don't hear anything from the FBI, from him, what they're doing, if they have an investigation going on. You don't hear anything. They're just trying to kick the can down the road and wait till the election is over, and they just think everything's going to be fine after that. But I think if Mr. Trump is elected, which I'm a Trump supporter, I think that his Attorney General could be, I'm not saying it could be Governor Christie, who would do investigation properly and go after Hillary Clinton and all of her aides and everybody else on these 7 questions that we have here. Bruce, you want to continue with the rest?
Sure. Just to get over the idea that the server wasn't protected, and then we're talking about the radio attacks, the active radio attacks, the insider attacks are somebody inside that's compromising it. So here was my point earlier. We don't know if anybody got already inside. There's a 4-year window to exploit her server. We don't know if somebody got inside the State Department or another agency and started using that information to get involved with our covert operations. So that's one of the things you talk about, insider attacks, but it might have provided a way for insider to get in, and then they could do anything they want. They can blackmail somebody at the State Department, go to their home. You know, these are common things that are done by foreign agents. They follow you around, they harass you, they might kidnap you, you know, these kind of things we're talking about. So that's the second one. We're looking at the private server and support team availability on a 24 real-time. God bless America. This is what everybody does, what they're supposed to do. You're supposed to guard your server 24/7 real-time. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to know who's coming in, where it's coming in from, who's doing what you're going to do to stop it, and then report it in. Then you go after them. I mean, that's pretty obvious, okay?
Right.
Able to identify adversarial tradecraft. Well, the tradecraft is basically what are espionage people doing? How do they get into your server? And we have a group that works with us called CrowdStrike, and that's, you know, Sean Henry. He's a former FBI guy, head of cybersecurity. This kind of stuff we all do. I mean, we all know about, but this is what we're talking about. What's the tradecraft? How are they getting in? I don't know if you remember Outrage Ames and Robert Hansen. That was before all this technology was available, but they were able to destroy our government agencies. I think 10 agents died under Eldridge Ames, and he was giving out information. He was a double agent for the CIA. And then you had Robert Hansen, actually out of Chicago, and then he transferred to Washington, and he himself. But this is the damage that was done before a private server. What happens if they're in a private server and they have access to all these people's backgrounds who are working in the investigative capacity and maybe covert operations or military? What happens?
Sure.
There's always a dead silence after I ask it because we don't know. And those are questions.
Well, we really don't. And especially with, as you say, the cybersecurity risks involved. There's so many ways that other covert operations, foreign agents and so forth can get into our system and hack it anyway. And when you've got a brain-dead Secretary of State that somehow thinks she's so incredibly brilliant that somehow all the rules and all the things just don't happen to apply to her, I mean, we can't begin to understand how much information has really been compromised.
Over a 4-year period, people get taken to task for a week, for 2 days, for 1 day, for hours. We had 4 years of not knowing what happened on an unsecured server. 4 years. That's what's my
Well, I just can't imagine how people can ignore this. And, you know, this is something that we've got to bring up before the vote goes out and before the campaign ends, because we've got to make sure that people understand just exactly what they're going to get. And I'm not going to say, you know, well, I'm not a Hillary fan, but I mean, this is just common sense. If you've got a Secretary of State that runs by these kind of rules and has such a total disregard for rule of law, she's not going to be much of a president.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that Donald Trump should be asking during the debate when the server and all these issues come up is, who at the White House, Department of Justice, Department of State knew that you had your own private server and were not using the government server and facilities? The other thing is, what was your intent by setting up a private server with emails instead of using the U.S. government existing computer system? So those kind of questions Mr. Trump needs to ask her and put her on the spot during the first debate. The first debate is critical for Donald Trump, and so the key things that he needs to talk about or the border security, jobs, the economy, and then go after Hillary Clinton about her total incompetence and ask her questions about the server, Benghazi, and other things, and show the American people how corrupt, how incompetent she's been over 4 years. When, as Secretary of State, I mean, I know State because I worked there, at Secretary of State, she was on the plane constantly. She traveled to more countries than any previous Secretary of State in the past. She was on the plane not doing her job, letting other people do her job for her, and then they would wake her up or do whatever and say, okay, we need you to do this, and, you know, she made bad decisions, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Obviously, Chuck, your background was State Department, and you mentioned it briefly, but you worked on embassy security. You were involved in basically the security architecture for the State Department for a number of years. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, you are correct. I worked with an individual who was in charge of diplomatic security. We traveled around. We did assessments on every embassy. Again, the State Department has regulations and everything else on where you put people, how you protect them. What they did in Benghazi was against every rule the State Department had. You know, we know exactly what's supposed to happen, what kind of security they need, what kind of protection with private details, what we call PSCs, personal security contractors, those sort of things. Everything they did in Benghazi was against the books. And so they cut the corners. They thought they were going to be very slick and do whatever, and they did not protect the people. And Hillary Clinton and her staff are responsible for 4 dead Americans.
Right, absolutely. And incidentally, that's a good run-up. At some point before the election, we plan to have Chris Peranto on, Tanto Peranto on the program with Major General Paul Vallely and talk about what happened at Benghazi, because obviously...
And when you talk about Benghazi, you need to talk about the Secretary of Defense and others in that chain of command that did nothing and covered it up.
Absolutely. Yep. That was a tragedy that did not have to occur and should not have occurred. And frankly, the cover-up on it is, again, using your terms, kind of mind-boggling that was allowed to happen.
It happened out of the West Wing. It started there, went to the White House, and then it went to the Department of Defense and the State Department. It was covered up. The plan was hatched in the West Wing. Well,
with that said, I hate to say it, but we're getting really close to the end of the program. But I would like to give both of you gentlemen an opportunity to wrap up the discussion on this, and then also to maybe give a little bit of information on your organization and what you do, and how we can support your organization. And frankly, I'd like you to leave information so that if the Trump campaign is listening to this conversation, that they'll go to your article and possibly get in touch with you.
Mm-hmm. Bruce, you want to go first?
Sure. We've been working on the Hill together about 14 years. Chuck and I worked on the Secure America's Borders Act, Secure Fence Act together. Chuck was the primary designer of the border security system with Senator Frisk. We've done a whole host of different kind of projects together on the Hill. We work out of Security Solutions Technology. That Chuck is our CEO. He's our chief cook and bottle washer, and we're all together as highly competent people who know the Hill upside down and backwards. So what we're trying to do is make sure through this article that all the different aspects to national security are clearly understood. It's just not about an email, and having problems with the email. It's about the complications of national security risk and exposures with email. Who's affected? How's it affected? How deep does it go? Where does it go? Those are questions that need to be asked. So I leave the rest to Chuck.
Okay, well, one of the things that I like about Bruce is he's been an investigator in the past, so he knows how to dig and knows how to go get the information. Again, with my company, we're just a federal contractor. We are working on many different issues, from border security to cybersecurity to Lucy and sort of things. But we thought it was very important that the American public really understand the implications of Clinton getting away with what she has done by not using government facilities when she's supposed to, and circumventing the law, the rules, the regulations, and executive orders, because if it was anybody else, they would be in jail. And so if we let her get away with it, we might as well give Snowden a free pass to come back into the U.S., and anybody who's prosecuted for espionage, they need to be let out of jail.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, gentlemen, that there is a double standard when it comes to our government, and the little people really don't matter that much, but the people at the very top seem to live by a totally different standard. I would ask you, gentlemen, to consider being our guest again. We've got, I think we touched on some really interesting areas, and I'd like to continue with this discussion down the road at some point. So I would say I would certainly welcome you guys back at some time so that we can get a little deeper into this subject. And thank you, gentlemen, very much for being our guests on Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. And with that, Kelby, I will turn the program over to you.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was amazing. One of my best buddies is on the helping the campaign for Trump, and he's very high up in the campaign. So I would definitely make sure he gets a copy of this broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to conclude the broadcast for this week on Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. We will see you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. God bless and good night.